begin tonight with breaking news in the West, the sudden death of Robin Williams. The Marin County Sheriff's Office in California says the comedian and Academy Award-winning actor was found dead at his home there today, apparently a suicide. Williams' spokesman said he had been battling depression. Williams was 63 years old. John Blackstone has details.
It was just before noon today that emergency responders were called to Robin Williams' home just across the bay from San Francisco. Williams was found unconscious and not breathing, pronounced dead at the scene. While the investigation is not complete, a statement from the county sheriff's department says the coroner suspects the death to be a suicide due to asphyxia. Williams' press representative Mara Buxbaum said the comedian has been battling severe depression of late. Williams' wife, Susan Schneider, said in a statement, "The world lost one of its most beloved artists and beautiful human beings."
Nanu, nanu.
Williams rose to fame in 1978 as an alien in the TV show Mork and Mindy. His screen roles included Good Morning Vietnam.
Good morning, Vietnam!
He won an Oscar as Best Supporting Actor for his role in Good Will Hunting.
You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about. Why, thank you.
His last TV role was on the CBS show The Crazy Ones. He appeared on CBS This Morning last September, just following his heart surgery.
Okay, let's talk about your heart because you've been very candid.
The cow valve is still working.
Yes,
I can crap standing up. Morning, everybody.
But how has your heart operation changed you? Do you feel you've gotten a second chance at life?
Thank you.
No, I'm glad you're here, really.
It's really wonderful because, I mean, Charlie knows the same thing. You get a big second. It's a giant reboot, literally.
You bet it is.
Recently on CBS Sunday Morning, Williams spoke of mortality.
It's all and gratitude for days. Just like, wow, this is a great life. You know, pretty incredible.
Williams made it so easy for others to laugh, but could struggle himself to find happiness. Earlier this summer, he was reported to have checked himself into a rehab center. In a statement, his family said the focus should not be on Robin's death, but on the countless moments of joy and laughter he gave to millions.
Today, the FBI entered the case of an officer in Ferguson, Missouri, who shot an unarmed black man to death over the weekend. That sparked rioting. Fires were set. Stores were looted. Today there were peaceful protests along with calls for answers. Dean Reynolds is in Ferguson.
Stand up, don't shoot. Protesters in this largely black community were demanding to know why an unarmed 18-year-old who was supposed to start technical school today wound up in the morgue instead.
No justice, no peace. We can say enough is enough.
Police in riot gear stood nearby today's protest to guard against a repetition of what took place here overnight. Looting, burning, and 32 arrests. Donald Harry watched it all.
And this is just like living in Beirut. My house is under siege.
Ferguson Police Chief Tom Jackson waded into the protesters this morning and got an earful from Sonny Ford of St. Louis.
We know what happened. The man had his hands up and said, "Don't shoot me." Why was he shot?
Do they have valid points?
They have a valid point of view, but the fact is that we don't know what happened.
But Dorian Johnson says he was with Michael Brown on Saturday, walking down the middle of Canfield Drive, when he says a policeman, who he described as a white male, drove up and ordered them to the sidewalk. Johnson said he then grabbed Brown around the neck and tried to pull him into his cruiser.
He said, "I'll shoot you," or "I'm going to shoot." And in the same moment, the first shot went off.
Police say a scuffle ensued, but Brown broke free. Johnson and other witnesses said the officer ran after him.
His weapon was already drawn when he got out the car. He shot again, and once my friend felt that shot, he turned around and he put his hands in the air, and he started to get down, but the officer still approached with his weapon drawn, and he fired several more shots, and my friend died.
Now, the name of the officer in question has not yet been released, Scott, but we do know he's been placed on paid administrative leave. And late today, the prosecutor for St. Louis County urged anyone with information about this shooting to please come forward.
Late today, President Obama tried to head off what may be an imminent coup in Iraq. Today, Iraq's president named a new prime minister, the head of government. But the current prime minister, Nouri al-Maliki, who was seeking a third term, vowed he would not leave office. Maliki then ordered loyal troops to take up positions at government buildings and around the capital. Major Garrett is with President Obama on Martha's Vineyard. Major?
Scott, earlier today, President Obama's top advisors said a climate of danger and uncertainty surrounded Iraq's political process and that the selection of a new prime minister was crucial to that country's future. Late today, Mr. Obama said there is reason for optimism.
Under the Iraqi constitution, this is an important step towards forming a new government that can unite Iraq's different communities. Now, this new Iraqi leadership has a difficult task. It has to regain the confidence of its citizens by governing inclusively and by taking steps to demonstrate its resolve.
With those words, the president pointedly ignored the current prime minister who is stubbornly clinging to power, Nouri al-Maliki. The new prime minister designate, Haider al-Abadi, is a Shia and comes from Maliki's own political faction, a sign his clout is disintegrating, even as he calls out military forces to protect him.
I urge all Iraqi political leaders to work peacefully through the political process in the days ahead.
It was the U.S. government that brought Maliki to power 8 years ago. The hope was that he would form an inclusive government and unite the country. Scott, that did not happen, and White House frustrations with Maliki, visible in subtle ways for months, crystallized today when the administration formally withdrew its support.
The U.S. left Iraq in 2011 after 10 years of war and 4,486 American dead. What was gained has been lost as Iraq is ripped into thirds by the two branches of Islam, the Sunnis and the Shia, and the Kurdish ethnic minority. An extremist Sunni Muslim army called ISIS has seized much of the west and the north. Last week, the Kurdish city of Erbil was threatened. The siege of the Kurds has been relieved somewhat by 19 American airstrikes on ISIS over the last 4 days. Holly Williams is there.
These men are Iraq's best hope for defeating ISIS. They're Kurdish fighters from Iraq's northeast, the only ones on the ground in this region who are still taking on the Islamic militants. Iraqi government soldiers abandoned the country's north 2 months ago, allowing ISIS to move in and capture their weapons and tanks, many of them paid for by America. The Kurdish fighters are famous for their courage on the battlefield, but today they lost another town, Jalala, to the Islamic extremists.
The front line is just 2 miles in that direction. This is as close as we can get to the militants' positions. And the soldiers here say they need more American airstrikes to help them defeat ISIS.
They also want the US to give them new weapons that are a match for the extremists they're fighting. Thousands of Iraqis are now facing starvation after they fled ISIS for this barren mountaintop. The US and other countries are dropping food and water from the air, but it isn't enough, and more than 50 children have died. At a command post near the front line, Iraq's Deputy Prime Minister, Roush Shawais, himself Kurdish, told us these men cannot defeat the Islamic militants by themselves.
It is necessary that the other Iraqi forces will join this battle.
But they ran away 2 months ago.
They can come back.
What would it take for them to come back?
First of all, a good government.
And Holly Williams is joining us from Erbil. Holly, is good government enough to end this conflict?
Well, Scott, it certainly wouldn't hurt. The Deputy Prime Minister, who you just heard, told us that Iraq is in a state of civil war. Now, many people here blame the current Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, for fueling religious tensions and allowing the Islamic militants to capitalize on them. But the problem is that divisions between Shiite Muslims, Sunni Muslims and Kurdish Iraqis are so deep that it's difficult to see how any government could hold Iraq together.
Holly Williams in Iraq for us tonight. Thank you, Holly. This evening, a sheriff in upstate New York says that there is no evidence that a crime was committed in a deadly crash on a racetrack. NASCAR favorite Tony Stewart was moonlighting in a minor league race on a dirt track Saturday night when he struck and killed another driver. Here's Don Baylor.
Sheriff's investigators were taking a closer look at the track today. Saturday night's incident was recorded by a fan. 20-year-old Kevin Ward Jr. was side by side with Tony Stewart's car when he spun into the fence in a dimly lit section of track. Dressed in a black fire suit, Ward climbed out of his car and walked down the track, pointing at Stewart. Another driver avoided Ward before he was hit by Stewart's car.
Oh, he hit him!
Ward was thrown 50 feet and pronounced dead an hour later. The Ontario County Sheriff's Department says no criminal charges are pending, but the case is under review by the district attorney. Chuck Miller was the race director.
It might have been Kevin just, wanting to show that he wasn't going to back down to someone of that stature, but it was just, the whole deal started as just a regular hardcore racing incident, that's all.
On-track confrontations between drivers is becoming more common in auto racing, but three-time NASCAR champion Tony Stewart has a reputation for being especially short-tempered.
And boy, Tony Stewart is after Logano.
He has been fined 3 times for his on-track behavior, as well as confrontations with reporters, photographers, and race officials.
I'm gonna bust his ass.
2 years ago, Stewart walked onto the track and threw his helmet at another driver he felt had wronged him. USA Today writer Jeff Gluck has covered racing for 10 years.
Tony Stewart is not afraid of controversy, and he can be a bit of a hothead at times. He's not afraid to battle with the media. He's not afraid to battle with other drivers when it comes to his opinions and how he thinks things should be done. But when he's in the race car, he's extremely talented.
Investigators are looking at everything from the condition of the muddy track to whether the lights were working and sufficient. Scott, Tony Stewart and his team told us they cannot comment because of the ongoing investigation, but yesterday they did extend their condolences to the Ward family.
Don Daler in Canandaigua, New York. Don, thank you. It is becoming the crime of the 21st century. Computer hacking. Today, we learned that a Russian crime ring has stolen the largest known collection of username and password combinations ever. Jeff Pegues is in Washington with the rest of the story. Jeff?
Scott, the hackers targeted 420,000 internet sites of companies large and small. According to Hold Security, the cybersecurity firm that uncovered the theft, more than 1.2 billion records were stolen. Usernames, password information, as well as email addresses that Hold Security says could be used and abused for multiple services. It's like having keys to your house that fit in multiple doors. The theft is believed to be the work of fewer than a dozen members of a Russian crime ring. Scott, Hold says that it has been monitoring that group over the last 7 months, but is yet to take the information to U.S. authorities.
Today, 20,000 part-time supermarket workers in New England were told don't bother showing up to work this week. There is no work for them anymore. For weeks, there have been protests to get their former boss back. He was fired in June by management led by his cousin, of all people. Vladimir Duthier is looking into this.
So this is incredible. This is about what this meat case has looked like for 2 weeks now.
Store manager Brian Casasa showed us his nearly empty Market Basket store in Salem, New Hampshire.
We really had no red meat, no poultry to speak of, and no fresh pork either.
RDT! RDT!
Hundreds of workers stopped resupplying Market Basket's 71 stores after their boss, CEO Arthur T. Demoulas, or Arthur T as they call him, was fired by the board of directors. Market Basket employees benefited from profit sharing and college scholarship programs Arthur T. helped create. Joe Garin and Jim LaCourse helped organize the protests. They were fired in July.
It's rare in America today that you see the rank and file and consumers standing up for a chief executive officer.
He knows our family members. If he walked into my office today, he'd be like, Jim, how's Lisa doing? How's the family doing? It's not about what profits are you making. He's a human being.
But the revolt and a customer boycott has caused a 90% drop in sales. Susan Berube had all her hours cut this week.
My family depends on that paycheck to live, to survive.
Market Basket's board of directors declined our request for an interview. They haven't said why they fired Arthur Demoulas, but a statement this weekend said 2 million customers shouldn't be held hostage for a business deal between shareholders.
RDT has done so much for the community and for all the employees that work here that we all just stand behind him and want him back.
It just may not be in time to save their jobs.
Last night was one of those rare occasions when people all over the world got to share a sense of wonder and awe just by looking at the sky, at the phenomenon known as the supermoon. As it rose over Hong Kong, Greece, and everywhere else, the moon was as close as it gets to Earth, less than 222,000 miles away. So it appeared 14% bigger and about 30% brighter than it does at its greatest distance. Crowds gathered to watch in Munich, Germany. Love was in the air in Madrid. Apollo's temple in Corinth provided a stunning backdrop. A statue pointed the way in Warsaw. This shot came from the International Space Station. The best view in Mesa, Arizona was from a climbing tower. And our favorite in Washington, the moon embracing the Statue of Freedom atop the U.S. Capitol.
Moscow and Kiev have finally reached an agreement on a Russian humanitarian aid mission to eastern Ukraine after Ukraine and the West dropped their objections. Russia says it will send a humanitarian convoy to Ukraine without military escort, but under the supervision of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Earlier, the EU Commission had warned Russia not to carry out any unilateral actions as Ukraine and Western governments objected to Russia providing aid for the region. The Red Cross said the humanitarian situation in eastern Ukraine is critical, as reports say thousands have no access to water, electricity, and medical aid. In the last week, the forces of the new Ukrainian government have been closing in on pro-Russia strongholds in eastern Ukraine. At least 1,500 people have died and nearly 300,000 have been forced to flee their homes during 4 months of fierce fighting in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainian authorities are planning to launch a major operation in the east of the country. The move is aimed at recapturing 2 key cities from pro-Russian militias there, but the concern is rising about the humanitarian cost of this military operation.
Run for your life. This is the advice of authorities in Kiev to residents in Donetsk and Lugansk as government troops tighten their grip on the strongholds of pro-Russian fighters in eastern Ukraine.
We call on the population to leave temporarily these cities as liberation operation intended to free the cities from terrorists will start soon. That is why we are ready to provide all necessary transport to evacuate these people.
Kiev has organized corridors for civilians to leave large cities located in the conflict zone, but despite shelling and absence of basic supplies, many decide to stay in the area. Only half the population has reportedly left Donetsk and Lugansk, which in pre-conflict times were very populated cities. Kiev is cautious about providing humanitarian relief to the people in the cities of Donetsk and Lugansk, which are under the control of anti-government militias. Authorities believe delivering aid to civilians there means that anti-government fighters will also get it too. Besieged militias have said they are ready for a ceasefire to prevent humanitarian disaster in the area, but many in Kiev do not believe in the intention of the pro-Russians and describe it as an excuse to win time.
Pro-Russians are afraid of utter destruction. They are trying to get out from this situation somehow. They are trying to use an excuse such as humanitarian help or humanitarian assistance.
However, officials from Red Cross say that the situation in the conflict zone is critical.
All localities where military operations have been carried out need humanitarian help. Those cities where there was no active fighting are in more or less normal condition.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Ministry has accused Kiev of attempts to completely destroy eastern Ukraine and insists on delivering humanitarian aid to the crisis-hit territories to stop civilians' casualties.
Some kind of firing hit their barracks. He said he leapt out and a man was lying with his head missing. He was scared and ran out like a bullet. He didn't even know how he got home.
This is a strict regime prison. The people jailed here are a pretty specific group.
when they end up in a city with a large amount of weapons and where the authorities are very weak, including the police and others. That could lead to unpredictable results. When these people start doing lots of foul deeds, it will all get blamed on the rebels.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says Israel has suffered a humiliating defeat in its aggression against the Gaza Strip.
I think Israel has been defeated and humiliated in its latest war on Gaza like never before. Israel is defeated in the world's public opinion. It is seen as a regime that kills children, the elderly and women. It destroys hospitals, schools and people's houses.
According to President Rouhani, Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people were so atrocious that even some of its allies had to withdraw their support. He made the comments in an address to a gathering of Iranian ambassadors and diplomats in Tehran. Rouhani also referred to nuclear talks between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany, adding that Tehran is open to constructive interaction. He, however, noted that Iran will not retreat from its legitimate rights. President Rouhani underscored that national interests are the red line in Iran's nuclear negotiations.
Thousands of supporters of Pakistan People's Movement or Awami Tehreek and other major opposition parties gathered in Lahore to mark August 10th as Yom-e-Shuhada. The day honors the martyrs of Pakistan Armed Forces who lost their lives in fighting against the pro-Taliban militants in the northwestern tribal areas. Several party leaders took part in the gathering. They say the time has come for Pakistan to stand with its armed forces in solidarity and support.
Our armed forces are fighting bravely against the militants, and we stand with them shoulder to shoulder. The whole nation wants peace and the eradication of terrorism from our soil.
The participants also took a hard stance against Nawaz Sharif's administration and accused them of corruption and incompetence. They say the government does not deserve to stay in power.
This government has failed to live up to the expectation of the people. That is why they don't deserve to lead this country. They are corrupt and dishonest and are trying to be kings rather than leaders. We will tear them down to pieces.
The party members also vowed to topple the ruling government and replace it with an honest and loyal leadership.
Yom-e-Shuhada remembers members of the armed forces who were killed while fighting against the terrorists. Pakistanis have pledged their complete support for their armed forces with the hope of a peaceful and free Pakistan.
We end tonight in the Republic of Kiribati, a nation of 33 islands straddling the equator in the Central Pacific. One of those islands was the scene of a World War II battle, and now, all these years later, it is the scene of a mission to recover the fallen. Chip Reed is there.
In November 1943, 18,000 U.S. Marines stormed the Pacific island of Tarawa. It was so heavily fortified, a Japanese commander boasted it would take 1 million men 100 years to take the island. It took the Marines 3 days. Jim Morrow was one of those Marines.
My first emotional moment come when I got over the long pier and I saw bodies floating in the water. That's when the shock hit me.
More than 1,200 Marines died here in just 76 hours. Dean Ladd never made it to dry land. He was hit by heavy machine gun fire while wading ashore.
And when you got hit right in the gut, what did you think?
I thought, well, I was a goner.
A.J. Bowden's unit had 31 men. 3 survived.
Was it hell? Is that a fair description?
Absolutely.
Now in their late 80s and 90s, 6 Tarawa veterans were recently welcomed back by the people they liberated so long ago in a battle that cost them many of their friends.
I never saw it from this angle.
Japanese bunkers and guns and an abandoned U.S. tank dot the shoreline, but they weren't the only things left behind in the fog of war.
We found a burial trench that goes underneath this latrine, it goes underneath the pigsty.
Mark Noah is the founder of History Flight, a nonprofit charity that recovers the remains of Americans who died in World War II.
This isn't really the context that people expected to rest eternally, you know, if they were to die in service and line of duty for the country.
More than 300 Marines are still buried on the island, under what today are yards, trash pits, even pigsties. History Flight recently turned over the remains of at least 40 Marines they found here to JPAC, the U.S. agency charged with recovering the remains of America's war dead. Wendell Perkins waited 70 years for this day.
You don't leave a Marine behind.
You don't leave a Marine behind.
No.
Is that what this is about?
Yeah, that's what this is about. We're bringing them home.
These Marines know that while they all gave some gave all. And they're here to make sure that sacrifice is never forgotten.